Hello and welcome, my friends. I'm Dean, and in today's video I'm going to show you where you can find Phineas Wells' shrink ray gun. It's pretty easy to get, and it possibly could be your first science weapon. Now, before you get too excited, you do need to know that there is one restriction to getting this weapon, and that is you will need to complete the main quest, Comes Now the Power, which can be found in the Emerald Vale on Terra 2. You'll need the power regulator to get your ship, the Unreliable, up and running so you can travel to other areas in the system. Alright, we've got a lot to see and talk about today, so let's get started. Phineas Wells' shrink ray gun is a science weapon. Upon closer inspection, we can see what this weapon looks like and the stats that the gun has to offer. If you're like me, at first glance you might think this gun looks familiar. The first thing I thought is that it looks almost like the alien blaster in Fallout, but that's where it ends. In a way, you could say this weapon works completely the opposite way that the alien blaster works. To me, this weapon is more like a defense weapon. Now, the reason I say that is because if we look at the damage that this gun does, we can see that it has a very low damage output. This weapon is governed by handguns in your skills, and depending upon your level of that skill, that'll determine how much damage the weapon does. Also, in your perks, there are two different perks that you can take to increase the damage that it does, but it's still quite low compared to other weapons. Another reason that I call it a defense weapon is because if you look at the special effect, it says weaken, and when used on an enemy, any other weapon will do more damage until the effect wears off. Basically, there are two ways that you can find out about this gun. The first way is to just stumble across it, which is actually really what this video is all about. But the second way is to get a quest that will guide you to this gun's location, as well as direct you to another area to find some information on a second science weapon. It's a win-win situation. Upon completing this quest, you'll get a second science weapon plus some really sweet XP. So first, let's see the location where you can find and start this quest. To start this quest, all you need to do is find your very first science weapon anywhere in Halcyon. But that's a lot harder than it sounds. You may not know where to look. So what I'm going to do is show you where I found my first science weapon, and that was on the asteroid Scylla. When you find this area that has several structures around it and is being patrolled by a few mechanicals, look in a house that's on the right hand side of the road, and in this green colored container you will find a science weapon. Now, I'm not really for sure if this weapon's R&D department's name is pronounced Joch or Hotch. Also, I can't confirm if every time you come here it's the same weapon as the one I found. I don't have any other tunes high enough in level to get here to check that out. So when you get here, it could have the same weapon that I found, or it could be a completely different random science weapon. I'm really not for sure at this point. But once we pick the weapon up, we can see in the upper right hand corner that we are now prompted with a new quest, Weapons from the Void. And if we check it out in our log, it'll say search Hawthorne's terminal for clues. And that's back on our ship, the Unreliable. Hawthorne's terminal can be found in the captain's quarters, of course. Now, once you access this terminal and you choose the right prompts, the quest will re-update, and it'll have a couple of subsections to that quest. One of the subsections will direct us back to the groundbreaker and search for information which will lead us to the second science weapon. Another one of the subsections will actually tell us to go to Phineas Wells' secret laboratory, which is where we will find the shrink ray gun. Alright, let's go ahead, head on over to the secret lab, and let's find this little bugger. To show the second way that you can get this weapon without going and chasing the quest down to go get it, I've loaded a new character up which has just finished the main quest here in the Emerald Vale. I've installed the power regulator, and now we can fly from Terra 2 directly over to Phineas's lab.
We've arrived at Phineas's orbital lab.
Hello? Can you hear me? Does this work? Oh, damn it! Blast, that's loud. I'm just securing my ongoing experiments. And securing myself. Mind the mess. I haven't had a visitor since... in fact, I've never had a visitor.
When you reach the sealed chamber where Phineas is hanging out and doing God only knows what, if you'll look to the right on the table, you'll find the shrink ray weapon. It'll be on this pretty cool little display rack. And when you pick it up, you'll be once again prompted that you found your first science weapon. Also, keep this in mind. At any time, you can always go back to Scylla to get the other science weapon that we saw earlier in the clip. And once you leave this menu, you'll be prompted again with the quest, Weapons from the Void.
I see you found my portable molecular compression device, better known as a shrink ray. Find a target, point, shoot. Your target will shrink down into a manageable size, whereupon you may commence beating them to a pulp. Feel free to try it on a marauder sometime.
Okay, Phineas, we'll go do that. Now, I did a lot of testing on this weapon, and I'd like to share my results with you. The first thing I wanted to see is how much the enemy would be weakened by the status effect, also how long the duration of the status effect would be. So as a starting point, I decided to use this character's original stats. Here we can see my skill in science is at 40. We can also see that the science weapon effect is at 18.2%. What this means is that the weapon's base special effect is 18.2% stronger. Also, in our perks, on Tier 2 we have a perk called Weird Science, which increases our science weapon's damage by 50%. Also on Tier 3 there is another perk with the same name, and it gives us another 50% damage increase, and it also stacks with Weird Science on Tier 2. For a total increase of 100% more science weapon damage. I've not chosen these perks yet, so this should really give us a great start to our test. If we use TTD on an enemy before we attack, we can actually see what the enemy's stats are. He's a level 20, has 699 in health, and 16 armor. So let's go ahead and shoot him with the weapon and see if any of these stats change. Okay. As soon as we shoot him, he instantly shrinks to about half his original size. He also has this, like, squeaky munchkin type voice, which is pretty hilarious in itself. But when we use TTD again, we can see that there are some changes in his stats. His health has decreased some because of the damage from the shrink ray. Also, his armor is dropped by 4, and it's now at 12. Okay, the next thing to do is see how long this status effect lasts. Okay, well, it seems to last about 2 seconds, which by no means is long enough to switch to a different weapon to do any kind of damage. So let's try to use the shrink ray weapon on him, switch into TTD, go to a different weapon, and see if we can get any shots on him. We can, but it looks like it's about 1 shot, maybe 2 at the most. So it's not really viable to use this without using TTD to help you finish off the enemy. Alright, let's go back to our ship and respec. Now I've kept the skills exactly the same as they were in our previous test, But what I've changed up different this time is in our perks, I've chosen the weird science perk in Tier 2 and Tier 3. Now we're doing 100% more damage than we were before. Also, I wanted to see if the duration would last longer by doing this. When we go back into TTD, we can see that this enemy's stats are still exactly the same as they were in our last test. So let's go ahead and shoot him and see what changes. When we go back into TTD, we can see that actually one thing has changed different than it was in our last test, and that is that he took a little bit more damage. That's to be expected because we're now doing 100% more damage with science weapons. But the armor is still exactly the same, and the time of the effect was still around 2 seconds. There was no change. Alright, let's respec again, and this time we're going to put extra points in our skill tree. With science being at 40, we're getting an 18.2% science weapon effect. When we increase this up to 50, we now get a 23.2% effect. So it's basically 5% extra by putting 10 points into science. Also, since we're at 50, we can now put points individually into science, and we'll take that up to 60. At 60, we get a 28.3%, so that's a 5.1% increase between 50 and 60. Now, if we go ahead and take it up even farther to level 80, we can see that it's a 38.4% increase, and of course that is another 5.1% extra effect. And then once we reach level 100, we now get 48.5% science weapon effect. So by adding an extra 60 points into science and capping it out at 100, all we really got was an extra 20.3% science weapon effect. What this means is that when we were at level 40 in science and we used the weapon on the enemy, the weaken effect of the gun decreased his armor rating by 4. Now with an extra 20.3% weapon effect, we should get his armor rating to drop somewhere around another 5 points. Also, I'm curious to see if this will increase the duration of the effect as well. Also, I didn't choose the weird science perks in the tier 2 and 3 category because we already know that all these do is increase the base damage of the weapon. Once again, let's use TTD to check out our test dummy stats before we get started, just to confirm that they are still the same that they've been in the other tests that we've been doing, and they are. Alright, let's go ahead and shoot him and then see what we get. Oh, alright, now look at here. When we use the shrink ray weapon, the armor actually dropped to 4. So that was a quite huge drop from 16 to 4. That's a 12 difference in armor rating. Wow, that's pretty good. He should be easy to kill now. Now the next thing to test to see if the duration of the effect is different, and no, it's not. It's still the same. Now one final thing I'd like to try before we end the video is to tinker with the weapon. We're going to increase its level from 9 to 17. That's as much bits as I have to go that far. Maybe by increasing this weapon's level, it will increase the duration effect of the weapon. And no, it's not doing it. It's still about 2 seconds before he turns back to normal. Also, it did not change the science weapon effect percentage either. Everything was exactly the same. The only thing that changed by tinkering with the weapon was the weapon's level and the base damage stat that the weapon has to offer. And it wasn't really all that good either. Well, I do apologize for turning this where to find video into a how it works tutorial, but after testing this weapon and seeing how it worked, I felt it was really important to share my results with you, instead of just saying, here's the gun, it's really cool, go have some fun with it. Also, I have another idea for a follow-up video on science weapons, but I'm going to need your help. If you would be so kind, if you find a science weapon, let me know in the comments below. If you can, try to give me somewhat of a general idea where you found the weapon and what type of weapon it was. If we can get up to 10 or 15 locations or so, I'll make a video on it. If today's video was informative and helped you out, don't forget to hit the sub button and the notification bell. I've got quite a bit of new content coming out on Outer Worlds. Plus, we do nightly streams on this game as well. Thank you all for stopping in, hanging out with me, and just like always, until next time, please stay safe and peace.